And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. During the 1920s, rough roads and bridges connected settlements such as Thornhill, Usk, Lake Ellis Lake, Remo, and Kitson-Kalen Valley. The old Skeena Bridge, opened to the public in 1925, replaced a bridge and ferry service located downstream on what is now called Ferry Island. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 2000.
The classic sound and look crossing Terrace's old one-lane beauty, the old Skeena Bridge. Although it's now the second crossing across the mighty river, it's still a very important transportation link between the Thornhill Kitimat side and the Terrace side of the Skeena River. The Ministry of Highways estimates that it still carries 2/3 of the traffic on some days. In the early 1900s, before the bridge was built, this is how people got across the Skeena River. It was slow, but there wasn't much traffic. Then, in the early 1920s, construction started on the first fixed crossing, and in 1925 it was completed and opened by the Minister of Lands, Thomas Duff Patello, on July 21st. Bob Cooper's family moved to the Terrace area in 1927, 2 years after the bridge was built. Back then, it was a pretty big deal.
Oh yeah, it was a big bridge, a quarter mile long. Yeah, it was a big bridge.
During the first 10 years with the bridge, the population of Terrace grew and the village became more and more dependent on the crossing. Then in 1936, the floods came.
Pretty hard for people to visualize the height the water was. And this cabin came down completely intact. And it flowed right through the center between the two piers, right in the top of the crown of the flood.
The water actually got so high in 36 that it washed away some of the pilings at the east end, taking 300 feet of decking along with it. For most of that summer, it was quite a chore to get across.
Well, they built a steep ramp down, just, it was steep enough that you had to be careful you didn't slide, so it was just for foot passengers and leading horses and things like that.
Back then, all of the roads were gravel, windy, and narrow.
I drove lumber truck from various mills to deliver to the rail siding. And we passed two trucks. They were maybe a little smaller than what you see today, but they were 8-foot wide trucks. They passed pole trucks and buses on the bridge. But we had a lot of fun on the old bridge when you got winding across there with a full load of lumber and some timid person came on the other end. It was quite a lot of fun.
The look of the bridge changed in 1954. The curves were altered when the western end was transformed to allow the train bridge to be built, linking Terrace with a newly created Kitimat. Then in 1961, two-way traffic stopped on the bridge, and that created a brand new problem for Terrace.
When they put the light on, at say around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, traffic would back right up to Calum Street. So it was getting pretty difficult to handle.
Then, about 15 years ago, the bridge almost burned down.
So they had a huge fire in a log jam one time, and just lucky there was enough wind downriver to hold it somewhat out, but they did have to replace some beams underneath. They were bent from the heat. But utilities were crossing there too at the time, the telephone and that type of stuff. So it was a pretty important thing to have, but they pretty lost it.
It has an exceptional history, but the longest single-lane curved bridge in North America is in no way antiquated and useless. It is still very much a part of the Terrace Road network today.
It's a pretty skookum old bridge, and I guess it'll be here for another 75 years.
That's what was celebrated this past summer during Riverboat Days, the past, present, and future of the old Skeena Bridge. A monument and plaque were unveiled to commemorate the last 75 years. This year, like then, terrace area residents were given the chance to walk across the span without traffic, a lot like it was back in 1925. Of course, the cars were allowed back on, a parade of the decades showcasing how automobiles have changed and how they've all seen the old Skeena Bridge. What of the future? How does this bridge fit into what Terrace's road network will look like?
Well, the long-run future of the bridge is that it's going to be there. It's a bridge that's serving a very real need, and through continual maintenance and rehabilitation over the years, we don't see anything beyond that bridge at this point in time in our planning future.
That's a long way from how Ramsey saw the bridge's future when he came to the Northwest.
When I first came here and saw that bridge, Jeremy, I must tell you that I thought, oh boy, there's something that maybe we ought to get at right away. But in fact, drivers in Terrace and newcomers seem to learn it very quickly, and with its one-lane configuration with the sidewalk, I think it's a very, very safe and efficient bridge.
But that doesn't mean there aren't any changes in store. Ramsey says Highways is planning to change the bridge's old Eki wood deck, one of the characteristics of the bridge that makes it unique, to a metal grate style seen on many other bridges in the area. And while it won't have the same sound and feel as the wood deck, a steel one will be a lot cheaper and lighter.
Well, I guess there's always a little bit of that kind of a trade-off, Jeremy, but we think that keeping the basic structure of the deck or of the bridge itself, that the nostalgia will always be there with that particular bridge.
And while the drive will be a little different, most people are pragmatic when it comes to the bridge. Whether the deck is steel or wood, the important thing is that the bridge will be there, as North America's longest single-lane curved bridge for a long time to come.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thanks for staying with us. In 1987, a garbage barge traveled for 6 months in search of a place where it could dispose its contents. The garbage barge traveled from New York to North Carolina, Louisiana, Mexico, Belize, and places in the Bahamas. All countries rejected the cargo. After 6 months of failing to find a successful destination, the garbage barge returned to New York. Let us return to the archives to bring you this story from 1992.
People normally go to museums to browse through historical or other artifacts, but to take a look at garbage, that was a switch. A group called Kitimat Understanding the Environment has been together for the last 2 years. It was launched in a kind of unusual way, and it's known locally as CUTE.
The idea for CUTE came from a grade 10 challenge class at the high school. The kids got together and were doing a lot of different projects, and one group decided to try and get an adult group going as their project. So they put an ad in the paper, and I remember because we had just moved into town responding to that. And so that group met, and from that group, different interest committees or groups sort of formed, and we started to talk about the things we wanted to be interested in. And out of that, I think the first real project that we worked on was the Hazardous Waste Day, and then things have just evolved from that. We decided at one time whether or not as adults we really wanted to keep it, but then we decided, well, how could we get rid of it? but it seems to have been catchy and good for the group.
CUTE mounted an education campaign in Kitimat schools, and at the request of the museum curator, started planning an exhibit for the general public.
We've had a lot of fun. We started in September, sitting down, the three of us, working through this, and all sorts of creative ideas flowed through, and it's been just a very exciting time for us.
So all of the ideas here came from the three minds.
That's right. That's right, yeah.
And there's so many innovative things in this exhibit. It's fun to walk through because you're putting across the message in a very subtle way, as well as a visual way. But it's so catchy that one tends to remember it.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Well, a lot of time went into this.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, the research had to be done.
Yeah.
Each text, each heading that we have for each part of the sections took a lot of debating amongst the three of us to get it just right. Even just deciding what sections we were going to to have into the display, the environment and all of the issues within it are huge. So we had to be very selective and of course decide amongst the three of us which ones we thought were the best as a starting display. We'd like to do something maybe perhaps in a year and a half again, hitting these things perhaps from a different angle, but we figured this was the best as a starting.
The entrance to the exhibit, The Tale of Two Garbage Cans, was meant to reflect the state of most families' garbage, the cans overflowing, the sign of an affluent society which somehow has to change. By walking through the exhibit, one could learn how to reduce waste, starting at the supermarket.
We're trying to show the consumer that they actually have three different choices when they go to do their grocery shopping. Most people bring their groceries home in plastic bags. That's the largest volume. The second choice would then be paper, and the third choice is cloth. What we're trying to show here is that this is the most viable option of the three. We'd like the consumer to take this past going from the grocery stores to also now taking cloth bags to the drugstore when you're doing your clothing shopping, so that it now transfers into all shopping and not just groceries.
A great deal of thought had gone into the informational posters spread throughout the exhibit, the kind of statistics that tend to stick in one's memory. The display cases were filled with glass bottles, nicely washed and tastefully displayed. And even though glass isn't a harmful product to put in a landfill, recycling it is a far better idea.
Even though when glass goes to the dump, it's inert, it does not hurt the environment. What we're trying to show here, though, is that by recycling one glass bottle, you can save enough energy to light a 100-watt bulb for 4 hours. So we're trying to show the consumer that it does save energy. The earth is then also not scraped of all of its natural components.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Back to Open Connection. In 1950, Canadians Harry Wasalik and Harry Hansen invented the familiar black or green plastic garbage bag. Intended for commercial use, the new garbage bags were first sold to the Winnipeg General Hospital. They later became popular for home use. Let us return to the archives to learn how long plastic containers will stay in a landfill.
One product that's very visible at any landfill site is plastic containers.
Not like the other three materials that we just looked at. Plastic is something that will stay in the environment, in the landfill site, forever. It does not break down. It does not decompose. And as you can see from the showcase, we've tried to show a variety, literally hundreds of different materials that are now made from plastic, that every single one of them is going to end up in the landfill site. The other thing that we'd like to mention as well is the fallacy over biodegradable plastics. That many people now have, different stores will give you your products in what's called biodegradable plastic bag. Yes, it's biodegradable if it's in the correct environmental conditions. That means that it needs sunlight to break down and it needs air to break down. What happens in a landfill site is the garbage goes there, the biodegradable bag is there, but it gets buried within a day. And once it's buried under hundreds of other tons of garbage, there's no way that it can properly decompose.
A way to reduce the volume of plastic is to buy in bulk.
You buy your bulk ketchup, put it back into your squeezable, and leave that in your fridge.
In order to reduce, reuse, and recycle, habits do have to change, but it can be done painlessly.
It takes time, it takes patience, and you have to sort of approach changing your kitchen one step at a time. Don't sort of go in with the attitude that I'm going to change everything overnight.
Does your kitchen look different now?
My kitchen looks much different now.
How?
But again, it's step by step. It started with the glass and the tin, newspapers, and we now do a lot more bulk buying. Plastic bags are reused whenever they're brought into the home. We try to reduce as many as possible.
Statistics show that only tiny amounts of plastics are recycled. Kitimat doesn't have a municipal collection system for such materials as newspapers, but CUTE has organised a regular newspaper drop-off.
It's been extremely successful. We have a drop-off system, which means that once a month, in Lower City Centre parking lot, we have a huge trailer where people bring their newspapers down to us. Last year alone, we collected over 30 tons of newsprint. So it's very successful.
And it goes where?
It goes down to Coquitlam to a place called Newstech, where it is then pulped and used again. But I would like to encourage everyone. We are hitting about 15% of the population of Kitimat, which in terms of tonnage is not enough. And we would like to appeal to the residents of Kitimat to try and please, again, change your habits slightly, store the newspaper, and bring it down to us once a month.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
According to Canadian Post website, to stop getting unaddressed advertising, simply put a note on your mailbox stating that you do not wish to receive Canada Post neighborhood mail. Place a note in or on top of the mailbox or inside the lip of your community mailbox, group box, or postal box. In this final segment of Open Connection, Sharon shares more ways we can recycle.
One thing that clutters up everyone's mailbox is junk mail. But that type of material just can't be handled right now.
Hopefully, soon we will be able to do that. But in the meantime, for some of the things that do come, you can refuse it. You can just cross it out, put it back in the mail, and if it's something that from an advertising company, you know, those envelopes where you get 500 different coupons in it, you can send it back if there is a name and an address to send it back to.
And then there's the garbage left when one finally pries some products loose from their packaging.
I guess one of the biggest beefs with anyone who's into recycling is packaging. And there's a good selection here of what I know CUTE considers very bad packaging. Could you perhaps give us some highlights?
Yes, I think probably the easiest way to explain this display is just to simply read this. Each Canadian family brings home about 1 ton of packaging each year. Now, out of that 1 ton, 80% is going to go into the dump.
A lot of consumers will say, well, there's nothing I can do because that's what you buy in the store.
It's true. And the people who make these products, they're very smart. They know how to appeal to all of us. They use texture, they use color, they use everything that they can. But what we have to do is to see past that and to be able to say that we have layer upon layer of these different packages which are not necessary. And that if we are more careful and more aware that when we go to the shelf and we know that we want a certain product, we look at the different choices that they are for that one product.
Fancy packaging also costs the consumer a great deal of money.
50% of the cost of your item is in the packaging.
It's hard to
believe.
believe.
When you that's right, 50 cents. So if you know that you have just spent $3 for, let's say, a particular dinner, $1.50 of that has only gone into the production of the food.
And it's going to end up in the landfill.
And it's going to end up in the landfill site. It's going to be a very pretty landfill site.
Garden refuge clogs landfills, but the municipality is expected to launch a home composting project this year.
If we look at the weekly amount of garbage for each household, 1/3 of that amount of garbage is compostables. That's out of the kitchen, your kitchen waste and your garden waste. If you take that one step farther, each city or each municipality, 1/3 of the amount of weekly garbage is compostables. And then if you take that a step farther, it goes right into the amount of waste in British Columbia. And 1/3 of all waste generated is compostables. So yes, it does make a big difference.
The exhibit also featured the tale of 2 cupboards, the ones filled with supplies to make our homes sparkle.
This is one of our favorite parts of the display. Red, of course, showing danger, And red, of course, because it is filled with hazardous wastes. These are things that people use in their homes every day, in their kitchen cleaning, bathroom cleaning, laundry cleaning, and all of these products go down into the water system. When they're not going down into the water system, they are, of course, being inhaled, and we try to show how sensitive we as humans are to just breathing in so many of the compounds that come out of these aerosols. Even if the can says no CFCs, that does not mean that it is safe for us.
Benign alternatives for maintaining a clean home were offered.
And there are options which are much better for your health. And we have here a recipe for a cleaning solution which would not hurt either anybody in your family, yourself, or the environment.
But is it effective?
Very effective. I mean, it doesn't matter what product you use, you still need elbow grease. And this is going to be exactly the same as any of those. So things like vinegar, baking soda, simply warm water mixed with these will do an incredible amount. Borax, using soap instead of detergent, using anything that comes in a refillable package so that you're reducing the amount of plastic going into the dump. Different ways, different things. This is a piece of cedar to be used as an air freshener instead of the packs that you have, which are very bad for the inside of your sinuses.
The green cupboard took up half the space and cost a great deal less, and doesn't result in the toxic soup that can leach from landfills cluttered with hazardous household wastes. With the cooperation of volunteers and small business, Kitimat has started down the recycling path. And if everyone in the community took part, not just the 15% of the population who actively reduce, reuse, and recycle, this could be the happy result.
The 2 garbage cans, which were so full at the beginning, have now been reduced to half a full garbage can, and this one we've turned into a planter.
And one thing people in Kitimat especially should remember is that their garbage cans should be bear-proof.
That's right. That's why we've shown these with these good locks on them, because they are bear-proof and dog-proof and all those things.
There were videos featuring commercials promoting products with excessive packaging,
Clean garbage,
the whole effect being quite unusual for a museum.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.
Another tool in the education campaign to teach the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle.